So you're ready to get your first camera, huh? We'll go ahead and stay tuned for some tips and things to look out for before you make that big purchase. What's going on, guys? My name is Henry and welcome back to another video. Today's video we're going to be going over some things to look out for and some things to think about before you actually go ahead and buy your first camera. First thing you should think about is what exactly do you want to use your camera for? Are you trying to take photos or are you trying to take videos? Maybe you want to do both. You may also want to think about what kind of photos and what kind of videos you want to take, because a person shooting home movies with a camera and a person shooting an actual feature film with a camera have completely different needs, so that's one thing to think about. For example, if you want to shoot home movies, you may want to go with something like a camcorder. The next thing you may want to think about is, what's your budget? Is it under $500? $500 to $1,000, maybe even $1,000 to $2,000. You also want to keep in mind you're not just buying the camera, especially if you're shooting video. If you're shooting video, you may want to get the camera, you may want to get some lighting, even a microphone to put on top of your camera for when you're recording videos. That's one thing to keep in mind before you actually say, oh, I'm gonna drop $2,000 on a camera and you don't have any other equipment to use to make your videos. If you're on a low budget, there's a lot of great cameras you can get your hands on. For example, I'm using the Panasonic Lumix G7, and that's about a $500 camera, and it shoots in 1080p at 60 frames per second, 4K at 30 frames per second. It's also a micro four thirds sensor. What that means is it has a crop factor of 2 times. So for example, the lens that I'm using right now is the Panasonic Lumix 25mm f1.7, and this 25mm actually means it's a 50mm in 35mm terms. Which leads me into my next topic, sensor sizes. You may not think that that's big of a deal, but you may want to think about it for future references. There are 3 main sensor sizes. There's the full frame, there's the aps-c, and then there's micro four thirds, which I'm shooting on currently. With a full frame lens, a lot of people who do photography, that's mainly what you want to lean towards, just because it's in the name. It's a full frame. Whatever comes in the lens is what's being received by the sensor, and you have a wider range of view, and you can easily get that bokeh effect or bokeh effect, however you say that. I know people say it differently, but that is like the little depth of field where you can kind of see, probably kind of see it in my background right now, but basically it's I'm in focus and the background's kind of blurry. Full frame sensors can do that a lot easier than, for example, a micro four thirds sensor, which is what I'm working on. So the exact same lens on a full frame sensor would be, you'd have more of a depth of field than what I'm getting right now. That's basically how to simplify it. aps-c sensors, that's more of a Canon thing. I want to say it's a crop factor of about 1.3, 1.7 maybe, but basically it's the exact deal as a micro four thirds, except instead of a 2 times crop factor, it's a little bit less, so you kind of get a bigger range of information. You can fit more information in it, but not as much information as a full frame sensor. And if we're talking about micro four thirds sensors, those are about the smallest sensors as they get. They're really good for shooting video because they're not as expensive. They tend to be able to shoot at higher resolutions at higher frame rates. So that's one thing to keep in mind, especially if you're shooting video, music videos exactly. You want to do the slow motion. You may want a camera that can shoot in 60 or 120 frames per second. If you're just taking photos, that might not be as big of a deal for you. Lastly, is your camera future proof? Is it gonna last you a while? Or is it just gonna last you maybe a year or so and you're gonna have to upgrade because you can't do everything that you need to do? Something I recommend is probably saving up more money in the beginning to get a better camera so it'll last you a lot longer, but that's up to you guys. Some things to look out for future-proof cameras are definitely 4K capabilities, can shoot in 120 frames per second, at least 60 frames, but 120 frames would be ideal, especially if you want to shoot music videos, because then it allows you to do that really crisp slow motion. And then lastly is, if you buy lenses, are you going to be able to use them on other cameras if you get a newer camera or upgrade your camera? So what I mean by that is, I'm shooting on the Panasonic Lumix G7 right now, which is a micro four thirds sensor, and I have a micro four thirds mount on the camera, so I'm using a micro four thirds lens. If I wanted to get a Canon camera, for example, I couldn't use this lens on it because it's a micro four thirds lens, which means the Canon sensor is just a little bit bigger than my sensor, so you get this weird effect. It'd be like a crop thing in the screen. It kind of looks like this, but yeah. One thing to keep in mind though is you can go from big to small, but you can't go from small to big. Let me explain. Basically, if you had a full frame lens, you can get an adapter for your micro four thirds camera for that full frame lens. Now, the quality might not be as good, especially if you don't get a really nice adapter, which can range from like $300 to $700 alone. If you do get a bunch of lenses for your small sensor, you may want to just stick with that line of cameras because you may have to break the bank if you want to get any more. Here's some cameras you may want to check out at different price ranges. You may want to check out the Panasonic Lumix G7, which is what I shoot on. It is currently going for $497.99 on B&H's website, including an extra battery as well as the kit lens. Another good camera to check out would be the Sony a6300. It's currently going for about $848 on B&H's website, so it's a little bit more pricey, but you do get a little bit more features with it. It's also a really good camera if you are more into vlogging, so that's one thing to think about. And lastly, a really nice camera to check out for filmmaking would be the Panasonic GH5S. It's currently going for $2,297.99 on B&H's website. Yes, that's a hefty price tag, but this camera is beautiful. It can do 1080p at 240 frames per second, 4K at 60 frames per second. It's basically any filmmaker's dream camera, so that's another one to check out for you guys. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please drop a thumbs up for me. It really helps me out a lot. Also drop a comment down below and let me know which camera you guys are thinking about getting. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time guys. Peace out.